Okay, alors welcome to the new episode of a Thought Experiment.
Okay, welcome to episode 17. Let's get right into it. Well, we had some exciting developments yesterday. I got thrown at for the second time in a matter of like a month. I got thrown at maybe a month ago at home on the first pitch of an at-bat, which whenever you get, I guess it was the first time I had been thrown at. And when you get thrown at the first pitch of the at-bat, I thought the next pitch he was going to hit me because he missed me, came behind me on the first one. But then he continued to pitch through the at-bat. I ended up getting a hit off him. We had a guy get thrown out at home, which would have tied the game or given us the lead. And then the guy that threw behind me that just gave up the hit to me stood there and talked shit to me, which is so funny. But whatever, fast forward to yesterday, or I guess what would be Sunday. This comes out on Wednesday, so Sunday. We're facing a team that we've played, maybe 7 or 8 times. And, you played 2-game sets. And so the same guy throws a second game every time. And he had gotten me out the first few times I had faced him, earlier in the season. Then finally I realized that he just threw a really bad slider, and he'd always throw it. And so I just started sitting on a slider the entire at-bat. Since I started doing that, last time I faced him, I hit a homer. And then just Sunday, sitting on a slider, triple. Sitting on a slider, single. And then the third time I came up, he went 3-0, balls. So 3-0, I was just going to stand there because I figured he was already so in his own head that if I just stood there and looked like I had no interest in hitting, he wasn't going to throw a strike. And he didn't. He threw it behind me. And since this was the second time it had happened in a couple weeks, I kind of stood there. I was like, hey, what was that? And then he started chirping, and some guys from our team started chirping, which they had my back. I appreciate that. And they came out. We had a little benches meeting in the middle of the field. But it was so interesting to realize also I hit a triple, scored, hit a single off of him, stole second, and then stole third the next pitch. So, I was just running through this guy's brain. And it was so interesting to see how easy it is to get into someone's head. I had meant that much to him to where he had to throw behind me, or he felt the need to throw behind me. I've never had that happen before, and definitely not something that happens in the States at a high level. I never saw it happen in Australia, only out here, and it's happened to me twice, purely because I just get hits off these guys, And it was funny to he throws behind me, and then he starts chirping and whatever with our team. And I just stood there at home and watched him. And he just freaking out like a child throwing a tantrum on the field. Because he had given up, 6 or 7 runs through 4 innings. But that was the observation that I came away with for the week was looking at someone who has no ability to control their own state, they have no nervous system regulation, and just when things spiral, obviously, things like that happen. You end up throwing behind somebody just because of the fact that you couldn't get him out. We're playing baseball. It's just so silly, and watching him throw this tantrum was so funny. And then the umpires, they convene. I go down to first base, and they throw him out of the game. Obviously, you just threw behind me. And he, like a child, points at me as if he's thrown out too. It's dude, I did nothing. I got the ball thrown behind me, and then I just asked, hey, was that on purpose? Why'd you do that? And then you freaked out. Thankfully, we don't have to play them anymore. That team will not be going to the playoffs, which, I mean, when you have players acting like that, it kind of makes sense. I actually think it was a really good thing for our team to come together and like show some camaraderie as we head into this final stretch. We have 2 more games next weekend and then in the playoffs after that. But I've never been in a game and been like that mad at someone, even like a pitcher who might strike me out a couple times. Like, I'm just not, what am I going to do? Like, throw my bat at him? Like, so silly. So silly. And it kind of, it's funny how these words that I choose continue to weave into like the events that take place, because the word this week is ataraxia, a state of serene calmness, freedom from emotional disturbance and anxiety, often used in philosophical contexts to describe an ideal mental condition of untroubled equanimity. That pitcher this weekend was not in a state of ataraxia. He was freaking out. And as I dove into this word ataraxia some more, it's the first thing that catches my eye as I research these words, sometimes centered around like being centered or aligned or at peace or driven, whatever it may be. They always come back to, in the Stoic philosophy, they always come back to aligning with nature and using that alignment with nature to kind of like push forward. And even in here, like, Stoics saw it as an alignment with nature. And you look at, and as I watched, this guy freak out this weekend, it's like, people want mental skills coaches, they want strength coaches, they want all of these coaches, in order to like improve. But you're not even giving yourself the space within like aligning yourself with the greatest power that is nature, And it just continues to become a theme as I research these words, and they, continue to come back to nature. Once he got ejected, he could have went and sat out in the park and listened to the birds sing a little bit, calm him down. But that's how it goes when you can't control your own emotions. There's going to be waves that you ride throughout a game, obviously. But if you look at it from a strategical standpoint, like the game itself, I think it takes some of that emotion out of it. When you, for instance, let's take an example. I get myself out somehow, and then I really like dive into why that happened. Like, okay, he threw this, and then he threw that, and the slider had the same, tunnel. Went along the same tunnel. Okay, he got me. Okay, well, the next bat, now I have a plan, similar to any type of endeavor that you're going to have. If you have a plan or you're prepared, it takes out some of the emotional roller coaster that you end up riding. Same as you study for a test. Okay, well, the emotional roller coaster throughout the test that you ride, as far as like, I know the answer, I don't know the answer, I'm stressed, thirsty, whatever it may be, it becomes much less because you're prepared. And being prepared allows you to come into that state of being okay with saying, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And that's something that helped me a lot when I went out to Australia, was taking the frame of mind as far as I went into competition, like, okay, I'm as prepared as I can be, but I don't know what's going to happen during the course of the game. Maybe he throws strike one, maybe he throws ball one. And then once the wheel's in motion, it'll continue. But going into it with some preconceived idea of what's going to happen is just, that's where anxiety stems from, is having these falsified beliefs that this is going to, like, I know what's going to happen. No one knows what's going to happen. We're just trying to give ourselves the best chance to be prepared for anything that happens and to be successful throughout those changes. Desire often lives inside of the illusion of knowing. If I have this, then I will feel that. And I think that's what you look for prior to competition is our brain wants to anticipate these things happening so that we can feel a certain type of way going into the game. We can feel comfort or safety. When in reality, if we can find comfort, obviously this is very cliche, but if you can find comfort within the discomfort of not knowing, well, then we're prepared. Then we're ready for whatever the game's going to throw at us. Nothing is going to get us off tilt. We can stay in a state of ataraxia. And as I continued to think about the word, it was like, as I grew up in school, I always grew up with the expectation that if the teacher calls on you, you should know the answer. So like saying I don't know was not, you would rather come up with an answer that was wrong than I don't know. That seems so silly because I don't know is like the most humble thing you can say, especially if you're prepared. Hey, teacher, I prepared, but I don't know the answer to that. I never did that. I'll just make up the answer. And that's where you get into that's where there's a lot of problems with formal education, but that's where you get into the problem of like working for grades rather than education itself. Just coming up with fake answers just to get by. And I've had the opportunity to play with some of the best baseball players in the world. I've had the opportunity to work with 8-year-olds. And neither of them knows what's going to happen during the game. And it's kind of, the similarity between a 8-year-old and the best player in the world is that they carry that delusional confidence with them. And at a certain point, similar like in school when you get told that I don't know is not acceptable, at a certain point it seems like, the delusional confidence in which we were born with kind of gets like taken out of you in a sense. And very few, in my experience in professional baseball, like very few people continue to hold on to that delusional confidence. And so we're all kind of searching for how do we get back what we once had, which was that delusional confidence. I mean, when you were in a Little League game, you thought you were going to, go 4 for 4 and hit 4 home runs. And it wasn't the anticipation of these outcomes. Rather, it was just like a self-belief and inner knowing. And I actually did some reflecting myself the other night as far as like, dang, I kind of shrunk my own dreams in a sense. And I don't know when that happened, and it's really not important when it happened. But there was obviously a certain point that I was playing where I saw it as more of like a dream than a goal. Like I saw it as something that like was not inevitable. If it like delusional confidence sees it as inevitable. It's inevitable that I'm going to succeed. And so as I reflected last night, I was like, I was writing out, goals of mine. And I was like, no, I have to think like, I have to write bigger goals. They have to be so big that no one else believes them. I don't want anyone else to believe them because they're mine. And so for any younger athlete or for any coach, really, it should be the support of those goals and like encouraging kids to dream bigger. And it's, obviously that gets said a lot, but like what coaches are really encouraging players to dream bigger. Funny. And that brings me back to a story. 2019, I played at the University of Alabama. I played under a coach named Brad Bohannon. And, he would always talk about, obviously, he got caught up for gambling against his own team. I'll bring that back into the story. But he was always talking about like Kentucky Derby, the over-under in a basketball game, whatever. He talked about gambling quite a bit. And then he would have these team meetings and he would say, you know what, we have the opportunity to be like a 500 SEC team. or he would always put a cap on how many wins we could have. And I thought that was like the weirdest thing. Like what coach puts a cap on how good your team can be? And talk about capping dreams or goals. And it came out a couple years later that he was putting in 6-figure bets against the University of Alabama baseball team, his own team that he coached. So no wonder he didn't want us to, win 16 games in the SEC, because he had the over-under at 14, and I'll tell you what, we didn't. We won 7 SEC games. SEC, tough league. But weaving it back into, like, I think that's where athletes or businessmen or artists, whatever they may be, look for individuals that will help them like come back to that delusional confidence. And that's really the only job of, you could call it a mental skills coach, you could call it whatever you want to, spruce it up to, but you're just hiring someone to help you come back into that space of delusional confidence. Because when you go compete at the highest level, you have to have it, or it's going to just expose you, eat you up. And so for me, throughout my professional career, is always going back and forth between, like, I want to be a realist, but I also want these goals. And it's a fine line to walk, but, when you have those huge goals out in front of you, reality is almost like, is the only thing you can look at, because you have to be present in order to put your head down and one day end up maybe in that place. If you're always looking ahead to those goals and not taking care of what's right in front of you, well, you have no chance to get there. But the goals must be out in front of you for you to, like, have a direction to go. Otherwise, we're kind of just walking aimlessly. And yeah, there's obviously immense value to being in the present moment. But there's also immense value to having those, like, goals out in front of you. And maybe the goals are what really hone us into this present moment. Because, okay, I want to do, take the goal of, I want to hit 20 homers in the big leagues. Okay, well, I have to take care of my swing today in order to even have a chance for that to happen. But if I don't have that goal at all of hitting 20 homers in the big leagues, maybe I'm not so focused on taking care of my swing today. And I think you could apply that to anything. And so that's definitely what I saw as I wrote down my goals last night, was like, oh, this is just more motivation and drive and life force to take care of the things right now, so that one day, if I take care of those things, it's inevitable that those goals will come true. It's inevitable. Because I'm someone that continually puts myself in the right scenario. Because I trust my instincts. And that's the delusional confidence that allows me to continue to be in the right scenario. And it's not shying away from it. No, lean into it. Lean into it. And there's just a certain point where I think kids growing up, and we all went through it, I don't know, whatever age you're listening when you're right now. But, if you're a 16-year-old and you're listening to this, it's like, your coach should be telling you how good you are. And yeah, there's work to be done, of course, but, like, there needs to be a delusional confidence that you can do this, this great, great goal. And that's something that I think is really missing in professional baseball, is the encouragement of those, like, dreams. There's a big misalignment with coaches and players in professional baseball, and I think it's just unwillingness of coaches to really, like, let go of who they were as a player, because when you stop playing, the game gets a lot easier, in your mind. And I think I've talked about this before, but like coaches should absolutely know, the draft, MLB draft just happened. You draft 20 players, say 15 of them sign. Okay, well, every coach should know where every one of those kids went to school, how many years they were at that school, where they're from. Do they come from a 2-parent household or single-parent household? Do they have siblings? What was their major? All these little things that are not hard. I mean, you can look it up and find it out in 5 minutes and then just keep it in a note on your phone. And so when you go talk to that kid, you have some reference points. That kid feels like, oh man, like that coach that I've never met, he knows something about me. He took the time, as opposed to just coming up and like, it just kind of shows that you don't really care. It's a big sign. I think that is the problem, is that you have a lot of coaches that just particularly like they care more about themselves than the players, and that's a dangerous, dangerous place when the leader of a group or a team or whatever it may be cares about himself more than the collective. That pitcher that threw at me cared about himself more than the collective because he was willing to throw behind me knowing that he was going to get ejected. And it just shows, selfish behavior of an individual who's unable to regulate their own nervous system. But if I can if I have the tools to regulate my own nervous system, stay centered, stay in a state of ataraxia, okay, well now I can set these like crazy goals for myself and stay in a state of like presence. Because I'm grounded. I'm right here. I'm right where my feet are. But don't get me wrong, I have goals that are way out there. They have to be. The goals have to be crazy. They have to be. There's no other way to go about it. And so maybe as you're listening to this, you take a second to think about your own goals, and it's like, what are my goals, and are they crazy enough? And I think that would honestly be a great way to kind of weave in the end of this episode, is like using that as the question, like what are your goals, and are they crazy enough? Because it's very easy to get caught in the mundane of every day without goals. Every day feels like a obligation, I have to do this. Well, no, if I have these goals, I set the goals, I get to do what's right in front of me because I have these goals that are out here. It's that fine balance of having vision, being a visionary, seeing what could be possible, what is possible, and then staying grounded and rooted and having the tools to self-regulate and stay present and take care of what is right in front of you. And it's that fine balance. And then, okay, right now this grounded state is not serving me. Let me think about this vision that I have. Yeah, that's why I do this mundane task. That's why I do it every day. And then when you're there and you don't know the answer to something, you have the confidence and the grounded awareness to say, I don't know, and just keep moving. And then go find out. Then go search through experience, through research, whatever it may be. But coaches should be encouraging players, and players should be encouraging their teammates. And it sounds very simple. Obviously, there's so many minute things that come into it, holding people accountable, whatever. But support is number one because it sets that fundamental base, ground up fundamentals. Sets that fundamental base for, okay, this person cares about me. Now I'm willing to take whatever criticism or whatever advice they have for me. And it all stems from just getting a fastball thrown behind my back. I had a little like dance move. I wish I could have just stood there and watched it go. But when a ball's getting thrown behind you from a left on left, I wasn't able to do it. I flinched a little bit. That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, that'll be the question that we end this one with just take a second to think about your own goals and ask yourself, are they crazy enough? Your instinct will tell you right away. And that concludes this episode of A Thought Experiment.